critiquing things, much like graphic design, is my passion. Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Katie, and today I'm doing a video that was inspired by a concept that Grapefry, aka Devesha, sent me on Instagram. She DM'd me and said, put on your Professor Katie hat and pick a page or passage from a recent book that you thought was impactful / well-written and analyze the word choice and stuff. Bonus points if it's something popular with BookTube, so you get that click. And so I didn't decide to do that, but I'm doing something similar where I'm going to be critiquing the first page and first lines of a couple of different books to kind of give my opinion on them, talk about some writing concepts, talk about what I think they did well and what I think they did poorly and could have done better, and overall analyzing and judging a book by its first page. I forgot my air conditioner was on. Sweat to death for you, dear friends. There we go. I have 4 different categories and a lot of ideas for future content with this series, so if you enjoy this and want to hear me critique books, then, well, let me know. And if you hate this, let me know that too, and tell me to shut the fuck up. So I left it up to my Instagram to pick which books I'll be critiquing the first line of, and of course, some of you were nice, and some of you weren't. The 4 categories I have is a favorite book of mine, a book I've recently read, a book I DNF'd, and a book I haven't read. So for 3 of those categories, I let you on Instagram decide. If you're not following me on Instagram, I am at Writer of Scribbles. I oftentimes ask my followers and friends what I should do, so I am ruled by the masses. So if you would like to be a part of that and decide what I do from week to week when it comes to my channel, you can go ahead and give me a follow. For my favorite book, I gave a selection of 4 choices, and luckily you guys chose my favorite book of all time, Vicious by Schwab. I have read this book more than anything else in my entire life. There's only 1 book in the categories that I don't have, so I can't actually show you my annotated pages, but for this one, I did in fact write down my notes while I was writing the script for this video, and we'll be going over my thoughts for it. So you get to have my really shit handwriting on your screen now. As far as first pages go, I think it's okay. It's not the best first page of any of the books on this list, but it is definitely not the worst. It starts immediately with questions. Who is Victor? Why is he carrying plural shovels? And why is he stepping over graves? It's an actionable first sentence that gives enough of a hook for me to want to continue on reading the next sentences. We get a small physical description. He's wearing a trench coat, and so we're immediately introduced to his villainous vibes. The simile, the sound carried like wind through the dark, is a bit weak in my opinion. And I would have liked something a little bit more specific to Victor and his uniqueness. Then we're introduced to our second character, so the POV is a little bit slanted and a little bit omniscient. I personally like being strictly in one person's POV and not jump around, but since this is basically a prologue, I'll let it slide. We meet Sydney, who is our other main character, and there are some interesting descriptions of her that give us a bit of an idea of what her character is like. She's in a too big coat, so it's probably not hers. She's in rainbow leggings, so she probably likes color, but it's not very auspicious for a graveyard, so it's possible that this is a rushed plan, or she doesn't have many supplies to be ready to go do this. It's not premeditated. And then winter boots, so we know right off the bat what time of year it is. And then we have a bit of their physical descriptions. We know that Victor and Sydney look alike enough that they're either going to be recognized as brother and sister or as father and daughter, which already conjures up an idea of what their dynamic is going to be throughout the book. We're told that they aren't related at all, which is handy because Victor picked this girl up off the road, which is a stunner of a sentence if you didn't know where it was going. So boom, intrigue immediately. V.E. Schwab does this dramatic turn really well throughout her books. She leads you down a line thinking one thing and then it immediately twists back on itself. So we get a little bit of their backstory and a little quippy, snappy line about Victor having broken out of jail, so we kind of know that he's a criminal of some sort. He's done something bad in the past. And Sydney has been shot. So again, both of these characters are introduced with a lot of mystery to them. And then we have an interesting line about Sydney leading Victor to believe in fate. So there's a lot of dynamics going on here, and we're already seeing the effects of Sydney on Victor, even though they've only known each other for a couple of days, as it has been said. In the next paragraph, Victor rests his shoe lightly on a tombstone, so we know that he's not one for respecting the dead, which is an important aspect of his character. Then we get a little hint of what's lurking beneath the surface, so we're already getting a little bit of those magical superhero-y vibes. There's a humming under his skin, which is akin to electricity. Wink, if you know, you know. We're already getting an insight into this power that he has, but it's not outrightly told to us in this first paragraph and first pages. So Victoria Schwab continues to add mystery and mystique into the layers that will hopefully have you continue reading the rest of the book. The page ends with Sydney asking if they are alone, so clearly they're probably doing something illegal. And if that doesn't make you want to read the book, I don't know what will. I think in general, this is a fairly successful page. It sets up the story well, and it doesn't have any massive pitfalls apart from being a little bit boring with its prose and word choice. There's some great lines to savor in here as well, and I think there are several great techniques being utilized in order to draw a reader in. Next is a recently read book, and for this I selected Cold the Night, Fast the Wolves by Meg Long. I just finished this a couple of days ago and I really enjoyed it. Let's open up to the first page. Here we go. First of all, I just want to mention that the top little poem at the top is really interesting and a cool little piece of poetry there. I really like that. Cold is the night that falls, yet faster the wolves that race the storm. It's giving Balto, and that's what I wanted from this story, and it definitely delivered on that. So the first paragraph does a really good job of establishing character, voice, world, and setting. We know that Senna is a fighter, but she isn't dumb. She knows her environment, which is Tundar, so we know she's not on Earth. It's also a icy planet with storms and hypothermia. The second paragraph immediately throws us into conflict. There are 3 men blocking her escape, so Senna immediately has a goal to get out of this situation and scenario. Senna notes that they either don't notice the storm or they don't care. So this immediately sets up a divide between corporate commandos and the locals that actually live on Tundar. The phrase corporate commandos immediately gives a sense of entitlement, and this is a setup for a conflict that continues throughout the story. There's some really subtle descriptors, such as the ugliest one and the smaller guy, along with actions such as smacking the pipe against the palm and then flanking her. So they stand between her and an escape, which immediately gives the character a goal and gives us a immediate moment of action. The third paragraph ends up giving us some background to the situation. Within a few lines, we know that Senna is a thief and a con woman. She's usually better at this, but not today, so perhaps it's because she's desperate, and this also alludes to a goal outside of being in this fight. This paragraph also sets up a distinction between the locals that live on Tundar, the tourists that come here for the race, and the commandos who work for the government as guards, henchmen, or soldiers. We also get a hint at the bigger antagonist, the corporate assembly. With the last sentences, we learn that Senna isn't always as careful, and it's not the first time that she's chosen to pick the wrong pockets, meaning she isn't a thief by choice, but rather out of necessity, and she had to learn doing this. So within the first page, I think it sets up our character dynamic really well, sets up who this character is and what she's doing. It sets up our setting and our world, and also gives us an immediate action and goal to focus on, while also alluding to periphery goals and conflicts that could happen later on in the book. So overall, a really successful first page. Speaking of dogs, and I think it sets up a really great start to the book. Successful. Oh, and apparently y'all hate me since you picked this next one from Instagram. I did a poll and asked essentially, which one of these hated books that I DNF'd should I talk about? And since y'all hate me, y'all picked acotar. I don't actually own acotar anymore. I gave it away a couple of years ago. So I did have to screenshot a preview from the library. So there's not gonna be any notes on it, but I was pretty thorough in my use of it, and I hope unbiased. I was dreading it, but let's get into it. First thing I noticed right off the bat is the excessive use of passive voice. The opening line is, "The forest had become a labyrinth of snow and ice." This could be rewritten to be way more interesting and less passive. Basically, the problem is with the had. Already we're shuffled into the past as opposed to staying right there in the action, which when you're starting a book, you're gonna want to start with the action, I would assume, you know. That's what they always tell you in school. Even taking the had become and making it into a was would already be a more successful sentence. However, I would like to rewrite this to, "The forest was encased in a labyrinth of snow and ice." Become is just such a weak verb, and I want something more interesting. Give us some flavor.
Where's the flavor? Where's the flavor in this?
Then we continue with the passive voice of who I assume is our main character, Feyre. She is now in the crook of a tree, and this is now a useless position. At least we already have a goal for her. She needs to find a better vantage point. The use of the word quarry confuses me a bit in this context. I assume it means that she thinks there's a trench hidden by the snow that she would fall into, but quarry also has a very specific definition. Like, I copied this straight from Merriam-Webster. A place, typically a large deep pit from which stones or other materials have been extracted. And you know, if you're gonna step into a quarry, I doubt you'd miss that. I really do, Feyre. I really do. The next paragraph I think is a lot more successful. It gives us a goal, a conflict, and an action. We get to know the setup and why this character is in the woods in a blizzard. She's looking for food to feed her family, so it's a good goal and it gives us a good place to connect. I will say though, it feels really similar to the beginning of Aragon, so it's a little bit of a tired trope, but I'll let it slide. Next, Feyre gives us some details about the storm. I like the details of the numb fingers, the flakes clinging to her eyelashes. Clinging is a great verb to use. I like that one. And we learn a little bit about the hunt, how deer move, which I assume is how it works in real life. I'm not a hunter though, so I cannot fully comment on that. And then we transition into our first bit of world building. Finally, so not in our world, but instead set in a place called Prythian, and it's a dangerous and deadly place to be, and not smart for humans, I assume, because I've read half of this book. So something that kind of irks me in general about this first page, we're given this offhanded, omniscient point that the fairylands are dangerous, and then Feyre shows that she's scared of this thought by shuddering, which is very repetitive. It could have just been combined with Feyre thinking about how even though she's starving, she doesn't want to go into the fairylands because it's a death wish. The subtle addition of weaving these two things together would also be a great bit of foreshadowing because she does actually end up in the fairylands. Just saying. So we learn a little bit about her backstory, that all she can do is hunt, but it's hard now because of the winter. She's stiff from a tree, so she gets down. She isn't careful, her boots crunch. We get the detail that they're afraid, so we know she's poor and doesn't have a lot of resources, and it reinforces her need to actually go out in the woods and hunt. So theoretically, this is not something she would normally be doing. It's a little bit strange. Low visibility and unnecessary noise on the way to yet another fruitless hunt. So we kind of see that even though Farah's been doing this for years, and presumably many winters, she's terrible at it. Feels like there's one of these plot pressure points where SJM is telling us something that Farah has to hunt and that she's been hunting for a long time, but she also sucks at it. It's like, if you really suck at hunting, how are you still alive, bitch? And then because she's doing poorly in this very safe area, she's going to be pushed into our inciting incident, which is to actually go into the fairylands to hunt, and she's gonna meet a fae. I've already read the first half of the book, so I know that happens. So in general, maybe I'm biased, but this page isn't giving me anything special. No flavor. Nothing really great. It's not bad. It's not a bad first page, but it's not great either. It does very little to connect me to the character of Feyre. It doesn't really describe the world beyond a distant, dangerous fairyland, and that it's cold and snowy. And since this doesn't stand out to me, and I don't actually like the book, and I know this for a fact because I DNF'd it, doesn't compel me to continue. Besides the passive voice and the repetitiveness of the details that could have been edited and shrunk down, it's not bad, but again, it's nothing special, and I wish there was some flavor to this. And the final selection from you all on Instagram, which was a book I had never read, and I would critique the first page having never read the entire book. And for this, you all chose She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This is apparently a fantasy that is set in 14th century China, and I know literally nothing else about it besides the fact that there is apparently a fisting scene in here. That doesn't make you want to read it, I don't know what will. So let's jump into actually critiquing this. What I will point out is it does say part 1 and does give us a time period. Like most fantasy books, the first page does establish us with an overarching sense of world and plot. However, we do start from a smaller scale with a description of a specific village, Zhongli. Could be mispronouncing that. There's a great metaphor that starts this book out and then is referenced similarly later on when we're giving context to what is happening within this place. Zhongli village lay flattened under the sun like a defeated dog that had given up on finding shade. And then, literally in the next sentence, we learn that they are unfortunately experiencing a drought. I like this because it is a direct reference to what's actually happening in the village. It wouldn't make sense to have a strange metaphor about snow or the iron fist of an army when those aren't actually things that are happening to the village, whereas the imagery of a flattened dog not being able to find shade and presumably dying of heat stroke very much matches up with the drought imagery. It's specific to this environment that we'll be inhabiting for the first part of the book. The rest of this paragraph world builds for us, but for me there isn't anything actionable happening here, but it is giving historical context to the world. Although for me, since the book literally says multiple times that we're beginning in 1345, I can gather where we are when we are, and I don't necessarily think this information is needed right here. I would have personally preferred that the description of our main character was placed above, as opposed to doing this rapid zooming in and out. So we started a medium zoom, regular zoom, and then we broaden out to look at the entire country as a whole, all of China as a whole, and then we rapidly focus back down onto one girl in this specific village. I would have wanted to start closer with the girl, who I presume is our main character. Only reason I can see for putting the historical context here as opposed to later is the fact that it states that there is a crappy emperor who has been ruling for 11 years and our main character is 10, so all she knows is disaster and drought, which is a good connecting sentence that flows into our main character, but I still would have preferred the character to be referenced first. Immediately though, once we do get to our main character, we're given a direct goal and a feeling. The girl is thinking about food and is hungry. This is a state we can all empathize with, and it grounds us in the reality of a drought in 1345. She's also described as undesirable immediately, but also in a very subtle way. She's said to have none of the roundness that makes children adorable, which also feeds into this harmful narrative that girls are often forced to grow up a lot faster than the boy counterparts and take on more responsibility. This is a patriarchal narrative that is existing all the time, and I think it fits in a historical novel. And it looks like that specific theme will probably be referenced throughout the plot based on what I know of the synopsis. She's also compared to an insect, a brown locust. She has the mandibular look, which I think is a cool word, and I think this description works really well. She's hungry like a brown locust. She's clearly integral to the plot and might symbolize the destruction of something, because locusts often destroy crops, and this drought has obviously destroyed crops. It also perhaps portrays her as physically small, as well as insignificant within the village, and perhaps in the eyes of others, and as something that is a nuisance and such. And this beginning state is really important because then it can be compared through the whole novel as she grows and changes. So overall, an engaging first sentence that falters with a historical info dump, but refocuses itself with a nice character description. Overall, I would read more. I think it's a well done first page. Could be edited differently, but not my book. not my monkeys. That is my first page critique for 4 different books, all within different genres and different aspects of me knowing them. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give me a like down below and leave me a comment on what books you would like me to first page critique in the future, or just tell me to shut the fuck up, because I don't know jack. You can also tell me that too. You can do whatever you want. Hope my glasses were a good enough professor hat for you. If you want to see more of my rambling face, you can subscribe. I post new videos every single week, and I'm hoping to get back on the bandwagon of posting quite regularly and not being stressed about it. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.
I don't always think about you, but sometimes I do. 'Cause sometimes I drive through all of the streets we